think I could talk to you except through music.
Van Houten claims she originally lied about Manson's role in the murders to protect him during their first trial.
That next summer there would be this big revolution and that the chosen people would live in a hole in the middle of the desert.
You know, it didn't happen overnight. He spent a lot of time taking middle-class girls and remolding them. I was an empty shell of a person that was filled up with Manson rhetoric.
The autopsy report verifies that there were superficial stab wounds in the lower back of Mrs. LaBianca. I have consistently testified and taken responsibility for those. The district attorney's office never presented any evidence that would refute what I have said. And so it's a matter of, I believe, my consistency, long before I ever heard of an autopsy report or anything else, that those wounds were post-mortem.
I remember in court I said that I felt like a shark just out of control for that moment. And I felt as though I were using all the strength I had, and I was very surprised that when the coroner's report was given that the wounds were superficial, that they didn't penetrate that deeply.
On Tuesday, June 11th, 2023, she was finally granted parole after serving 53 years in prison.
Karma's a bitch.
Leslie Louise von Houten was born on August 23, 1949. She's a former member of the Manson family. During her time with Manson's group, she was known by various aliases such as Luella Alexandria, Leslie Marie Skankston, Linda Sue Owens, and Lulu. She was born in the Los Angeles suburb of Altadena to Paul Van Houten and Jane Edwards. She grew up in a middle-class church-going family along with an older brother and two adopted siblings, a brother and a sister who were both Korean. Her mother and father divorced when she was 14. She began taking LSD and Bezedrine and smoking hashish around the age of 15. She ran away for a time but returned to complete her high school education. She told people that later at age 17 she became pregnant and was ordered by her mother to undergo an abortion and to bury the aborted fetus in their backyard. She said that after this event she felt very removed from her mother and harbored intense anger towards her. She had a period of interest in yoga and took a year-long secretarial course but became a hippie living at a commune. She graduated from Monrovia High School in Monrovia, California in 1967. After a few months of staying in the commune in North California, she met Catherine Scher and Bobby Beausoleil and moved in with them and another woman during the summer of 1968. The four broke up after jealous arguments, and Scher left to join Charles Manson's commune. Leslie Van Houten followed Scher, and she was only 19 years old at the time. At the time, she actually picked up the phone and called her mother to say she was dropping out and would not be making contact with her family again. I covered the Manson family and the crime that was committed on my channel, but as most people are aware, Leslie Von Houten was involved in the murders of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca on August 9th, 1969. Leslie Van Houten was actually one of the women that held down Rosemary LaBianca as Tex Watson stabbed her husband. After he stabbed Rosemary, he handed Leslie the knife and she stabbed the woman at least 14 more times. She testified in 1971, and I took one of the knives, and Patricia had one, a knife, and we started stabbing and cutting up the lady. Van Houten dismissed 3 defense lawyers in succession for claiming her actions were attributable to Manson's control over her. When her lawyer was asking an expert witness about the effect of LSD on judgment, Van Houten shouted that, "This is all such a big lie. I was influenced by the war in Vietnam and TV." Manson decided when they would eat, sleep, and have sex, and with whom they would have sex. He also controlled the taking of all of the LSD, giving followers larger doses than he even took. According to Van Houten, she became saturated in acid and could not grasp the existence of those living a non-psychedelic reality. Van Houten said that Manson's attitude was that she belonged to Bobby. According to Van Houten, she and other Manson followers looked to 14-year-old family member Diane Lake as the empty vessel, the epitome of what women were supposed to be in the Manson system of values. When Barbara Hoyt spoke at Van Houten's parole hearing in 2013, she said that Van Houten was considered a leader in the Manson family. A lot of people referred to her as Charles Manson's golden child. Van Houten was originally sentenced to death for helping Manson's followers carry out the August 1969 killings of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. Those murders came one night after the shocking killings of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others. Leslie's sentence was later commuted to life in prison when the California Supreme Court overturned the state's death penalty law in 1972. But that first conviction was then thrown out on appeal as her attorney died during trial and she wasn't granted a delay. A subsequent court proceeding resulted in a mistrial, with 7 jurors voting for a murder conviction and 5 believing she was guilty of manslaughter instead. No matter what though, they all thought she was guilty. The district attorney's office would consider a manslaughter plea deal, and she was then convicted of murder at a mid-1978 trial. But for about 6 months before that trial, she was actually out on bail and attended classes to become a legal secretary. Lino Bianca's daughter told Associated Press last week, "My children and my grandchildren never got an opportunity to get to know either of them, which has been a huge void for my family." The most famous Van Houten supporter is likely filmmaker John Waters, who has visited Van Houten in prison since the 1980s and wrote about her in one of the essays in the 2010 book Role Models. "Somebody has to stick up for the worst people in the world. They weren't born bad," Waters said in a New York Times profile. He has argued it is believable that a hardened criminal like Manson, who had spent much of his teens and 20s in prison, could influence an LSD-addled young person. Van Houten spent about 53 years in custody. According to a 2018 Justice Department report, the median time served in state prison for murder across the U.S. is 18 years. Van Houten is the first member of the cult involved in either of the Tate or LaBianca's murders to be released, but not the first with a murder conviction to be released. Steve Grogan was sentenced to death in 1971 for the killing of elderly ranch hand Donald Shea, a murder that took place 2 weeks after the grisly Tate LaBianca weekend, but was little known for a time. The judge in the case resentenced him to life imprisonment, stating that Grogan was too stupid and too hopped up on drugs to decide anything on his own. Despite that life sentence, though, he has been out of prison since the 1980s, likely earning credit for telling authorities in 1977 where Shea was buried. Other Manson followers convicted of crimes other than homicides have been out for years, including Lynette Squeaky Frum, who once attempted to shoot then-President Gerald Ford. Bruce Davis, Bobby Beausoleil, and Patricia Krenwinkel, all between 75 and 80, have all been recommended for parole at various times, but in each case where that has happened, the governor in power has reversed the decision. Charles Tex Watson, who's 77, now helped carry out the murders at the Tate gathering and at the residence of the LaBiancas. He is generally considered the least likely candidate to be released, and in late 2021, he was denied parole for an 18th time. However, just this past week, on Tuesday, Leslie Van Houten was freed from a California prison. This has been a stunning development after she had served more than half a century for one of the infamous murders carried out by the Charles Manson followers. She is 73 years old now, and this is going to be awful news for anyone that is in the Tate family. You do need to know, however, that Leslie Van Houten has long since renounced Manson, who died in prison in November of 2017. She has expressed remorse for her crimes, and at her 2013 parole hearing, her attorney argued that her value system was completely different from what it was in 1972. She expressed that she takes offense to the fact that Manson doesn't own up to his role in the murders. She told Vincent Bugliosi, the man who sent her to prison, "I take responsibility for my part, and part of my responsibility was helping to create him." She has written several short stories, once edited the prison newspaper, and did some secretarial work in prison. She was recommended for parole several different times and was denied it until this year. On May 30th of 2023, a California Court of Appeal in Los Angeles set aside Governor Newsom's denial of Van Houten's parole, thus becoming the first Manson family member to have a court rule in her favor for a parole recommendation. And then on July 7th, Governor Newsom announced that he would not appeal the California Supreme Court to block her parole, paving the way for her release. And then, as I stated, she was released 2 days ago on July 11th, and now she is out. Her past parole hearings have appeared on court TV and attracted nationwide media attention. They have featured comments from former prosecutors, relatives of her victims, and relatives of the victims of other killings. Van Houten also told her story on the podcast Ear Hustle in the 2021 episode, Home for Me Really Is a Memory. Who knows where she will go in future? My question now for you is, do you agree with this decision? Do you think that she should be allowed to be paroled from prison after the crime that she committed? And if you don't really know what I'm talking about, I did a 3-part series on Charles Manson's cult. Please do go and check that out and then come back and let me know what you think. Please give the video a like, share it around to let everyone know. I think if you're living in the California area, you should probably weary and know that she is out. Again, my heart goes out to the family of Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas. I am sure that they are all very upset that this has happened, and I'm with them. I'm not too pleased that she's out personally. But again, let me know what you think down below. And no matter where you are or what you're doing, I hope that you're having a fabulous, fabulous day. Take care, and I'll see you all very, very soon with another one. Hopefully with better news than this. Mwah. Bye! And honestly, fuck you, Leslie Van Houten. I don't know if you've changed.
This morning, convicted murderer Leslie Van Houten, one of Charles Manson's most famous followers, is out of prison. Van Houten was released to parole supervision on Tuesday in Los Angeles. The 73-year-old had been serving a life sentence after she was convicted for the gruesome killings of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca in 1969.
They call me a god. 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 Let's go. I'm about to go off like a weapon. Fuel to the top, got a filled up engine. In my thoughts, obsession. I will not stop, no, I'm never second guessing. I got a God complex. Haters love to hate, but I never feel pressed. Got a lot on my plate, but I never get stressed. I'll take all the pressure like I'm acing this test. Tear it up like I'm Jason. I see the world like it's ready for the taking. I see this place like a game I'm playing. Straight to the bank to collect my payments. No negotiations, it's my way, I was born impatient. And like a damn Freemason, I'll run this nation. They call me a